This video is sponsored by me. I have a book out. Do you like short horror stories in the vein of Stephen King? Small town interconnected intrigue a la Ray Bradbury? The narrative weirdness of Gene Wolfe? Then this may be the book for you. Pick up Taking Root by Kyle Pinion today at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and any online book retailer. Well, hello. Long time no see. Hope you guys have all been well. I just beat COVID. Hooray! This was the second time I've had COVID, officially, though I think I might have had it 3 times overall. But this was less bad than before. The first time I had it for sure, I was bedbound for like 10 days. This time it was, I felt pretty bad and didn't want to get out of bed a lot, but I got over it pretty quickly. I think within like 4 days. You'll probably see some articles and stuff about this thing called razor blade throat. And that's sort of what I had. It was really significantly difficult, like sore throat, strep throat kind of thing that made its way into my sinuses. And it didn't last as long as the previous time. Like I had it for like 10 days the first time. This time, I think it only was in my system for maybe like 5 or 6 days. And my partner had it for like the exact same amount of time before then. It was really funny how our patterns like converged. But with that said, I had a lot of time on my hands to read. And I was able to get through 3 books that had been on my TBR list for a while, so I wanted to talk about them. These are the 3 books that got me through COVID. The Urth of the New Sun by Gene Wolfe. Those of you who follow the channel know that the Book of the New Sun is a series that is very near and dear to my heart. Probably one of the cornerstones of my fiction reading. One of those things that, like, I don't know, bury me with a copy of it, probably like King Tut. But I have read the Book of the New Sun twice, and I recently completed that second reading only a few weeks ago. And it was as profound to me as it ever was. But I had never read The Urth of the New Sun, which is the sequel that happened to have come out a couple of years after the Book of the New Sun completed its publishing. And the story behind it is that Gene Wolfe had gotten some editorial requests to like put out a book that answered more of the questions of the Book of the New Sun, because it ends in sort of a vague way in terms of like what the result of Severian's big trial with the Hyrule Zadkiel. It all sounds like nonsense if you've never read Book of the New Sun. But anyway, that's sort of like the big core question that was like hanging over the end of that book. And The Urth of the New Sun was an aim to answer that, despite the fact that Wolfe felt like readers who pay attention would know what the answer is and it didn't need to be written. But he wrote it anyway. And not only does he address that question, but he also addresses one of the more inexplicable things of the Book of the New Sun. That if you've read it, it deals with this ancient Incan god named Apu Punchal. And when you're reading the core books, it feels like it kind of comes out of nowhere. And it's one of the things that like a lot of readers debated, I think, for some time. And Urth of the New Sun answers what that entire bit meant in the first place. I will say I have mixed feelings about the Urth of the New Sun. Which is crazy because I absolutely love Wolfe's writing. He's probably like a top 3 writer for me in terms of inspiration and in terms of just general enjoyment and just a lot of things that like draw me to him as a storyteller. But The Urth of the New Sun feels a little perfunctory at times. I feel like it answers questions that I would have preferred it not answer. I like a little bit of ambiguity in my storytelling. I mean, as you guys know from my previous video about Elden Ring and about some of the videos where I've talked about Wolfe before and other storytellers of a similar stripe, I like to be able to sort of piece things together myself and kind of have my own reads on things, death of the author and all that. The Book of the New Sun is one of those puzzle piece books that allows you to do that sort of thing. But The Urth of the New Sun does provide some concrete answers, especially if you are paying very close attention to it, similarly to the Book of the New Sun. And I just kind of felt like it took away some of that joy for me, because now I know. Now I know what something means, and I kind of was a little put off by that. I would also say that the first half of the book is a lot weaker than the second half. I don't think that's an unpopular opinion. I think a lot of people think that. There's this whole stretch where Severian, now 10 years older from the Book of the New Sun, is kind of, he's on this ship on the way to this trial that will determine if he's going to become the new sun or not. And he kind of bounces around on this ship sort of like a human pinball, going from one situation to another situation to another situation in a sort of like picaresque, episodic sort of way, in a lot of these little sequences that feel disconnected until you finally realize what's going on. And I think the final resolution for those sequences is worth the payoff, but it takes a long time to get there, and there's a lot of time where you're wondering, what in the world's going on? Why is he why does he keep falling off of off of these walkways? And why does he keep bouncing around on the ship? And is this how, it's just one of these things that I found really straining as a reader. The second half is much better, but the second half is like where all the answers come in. And so I just kind of struggled with that a bit, though some of the storytelling in the second half of the book is really quite wonderful, particularly when Severian travels in time and comes face to face with the previous autarch from before his own time, Typhon, and we see a lot of things that I think were clear puzzle pieces and clear solutions that were put in place by Wolfe, even in the core book, spelled out in a way that some of it I found dissatisfying and frustrating, but then sometimes I thought, oh, that's pretty cool. Okay, that's pretty neat. All right, now I understand Typhon a little better. Now I get the concept of the White Fountain now, and all that. But I just think overall it was sometimes a bit of a slog, and sometimes I even felt a little bit of some of that untrustworthy narration. It wasn't as apparent to me in this book as it was in the previous 4 books. Severian felt like a little bit of a different person, and that may have been by design. Thecla does occasionally, her voice does still sort of ring true through that book and through Severian's internal narration, but not to the same degree where I was finding myself questioning everything Severian was saying in the way that I would in the Book of the New Sun, because I was just trying to figure out what the heck was going on for most of it. But maybe a second read through, I'll feel a lot better about it. But in the current one, I can only give it 3 stars. One of the cool things about the book, by the way, and I didn't mention this, it's kind of funny, is that the end message is kind of like this idea of be excellent to each other, kind of similar to Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. And speaking of that, the next book I read was Guy Gavriel Kay's Written on the Dark. This was a brand new book that just came out a month and a half ago. And it is set in his world of Jad. The idea behind this, for those of you who are not familiar with Kay's work, is that this Jadite world is basically our world, but with just a twist of fantasy. So countries have different names, and the god is Jad, and then their version of the Jewish people have a different name. There's the Asherites, and there's all these others. There are all these different factions that can be aligned to real world history. So it's historical fantasy, I guess you would say. Though the fantasy is really muted. It's really just historical fiction with just a tiny bit of fantasy in it. I read one of his first books, Tagana, and absolutely loved it. It's not a part of this Jad world. It's its own separate thing, and it's much more fantastical. But this was my first sort of dipping my toes in, because I had gotten
an early copy from the publisher who was so kind to send it to me. And then I just ended up getting my pre-order anyway. And so I was like, let me read this book. And for about a big stretch of it, I wasn't sure if I dug it. The general gist is it's set in 14th centuries Ferriers, whatever. It's France, and it mostly set in his version of 14th century Paris called Oran. The lead character is a guy named Terry. He is a poet who is sort of like a failed attorney who like turned to writing because he just wasn't very interested in the law and practicing law. He ends up getting mixed up in a sort of royal murder mystery where the brother of the mad king of this country was found dead and beheaded in the middle of this Oran street or Parisian street. And because he has like some experience with like the underground and the like, the leading law enforcement official decides he's going to enlist him to like help him investigate this murder mystery and find out who killed the king's brother, why, and bring that person to justice, etc. I thought that the first half was pretty intriguing. And for a while though, I felt like there were things that were a little underwritten because the book is really quite short. I think it's only it's only 300 pages, which is normally a wonderful thing for me. I like really short works of speculative fiction. But I also found myself wondering like, this could be explored just a little more. This could be explored a little more. I'd like to know more about Terry. I just don't care enough about him. But as the book sort of gets past its whodunit aspect, which doesn't really last very long. It really only is for like the first quarter of the narrative that we're wondering who even did it. It's figured out pretty quickly, and that person is put on trial. And I think the book really accelerates once it gets past all of this. Like, wait, why is the provincial official trying to like bring in this poet to like investigate it? It's a little bit of a stretch. But once you get into the actual trial, and then we kind of move into the real world battle, because again, since it's set in 14th century France, it means it's also set during the 100 Years' War, which sees not only sort of the potential breakout of civil war within this analog of France, but also a battle between the French armies of this mad king and the British armies that are attempting to invade. And so we see a bit of that battle, and we also see a stand-in for Joan of Arc, which I think is when the book really shines. Once that character appears, almost seemingly out of nowhere, I think the book suddenly accelerates and becomes a much more fascinating thing to read. And by the time I got to the final pages, I ended up loving this book, which is funny because I think a lot of people, when I've seen like advanced reviews, there's been a lot of muted, I think, appreciation for this book. It's like, oh, it's good, it's well written, but it's not as good as these other K books that I've read. But I have to say, as somebody that's only read Tagana, this is a really excellent novel. And I think this idea of mixing history with fantasy and kind of pushing me more towards learning about things that I don't know that much about. Like, I know a little bit about European history, mostly British history, to be honest with you. Once we get into like French and Spanish history, I'm a little more of a Luddite. But it makes me want to learn more about it. And I don't know, I really enjoyed this book, and I think anybody who kind of finds those same subject matters as intriguing as I do, tied in with some beautiful, beautiful turns of phrase. Kay continues, in my limited reading of him, to be one of the best fantasy writers that I've had the pleasure of reading. And there are passages here that are going to stick with me for a very long time. I think you should check this book out. I give it 4 stars. And last but not least, I read my first Christopher Priest novel, as well as my first of the many NYRBs I picked up over time. This is Inverted World. This was his big breakout novel. You might know Christopher Priest, not to confuse him with the comic book writer that lifted his name inexplicably. But you might know Christopher Priest as the author of the book The Prestige, which became a Christopher Nolan movie. This was a work that he wrote about 20 years before, I think. Yeah, about 20 years before. And it is about a population that lives on a train on a seemingly alien world. This train is forever moving forward. It is called, they call the train Urth. And people who are living on this train all belong to either guilds or have some role within their society. The main character in Inverted World is a guy named Hellward Mann, and he has been enlisted now that he's graduated from their version of school, which they call a creche, to the Futures Guild. And in the Futures Guild, one of the things they have to do is that they have to go ahead of the train to sort of survey and explore the area before them, so they can determine, do we need to get a bridge built? What's the terrain like? Are there any enemies that we need to be aware of, or any threats to our civilization? And in that way, it's kind of similar to something like a Snowpiercer, but with like the political machinations of like a Dune. I mean, that's a really sort of lame, not particularly well thought out way to put it, but I think it's comparable to neither of those. But that's like the easy shorthands that I can sort of mention. But the book continuously confounds your own expectations too. And I think a hook that I can provide without spoiling too much is that when Hellward goes on one of his expeditions, he hears about from one of the militia members that also are a part of this city. They say, have you gone down past yet? And he said, what does that mean? Well, you'll find out, they say. And so he is tasked with escorting a group of women who are part of this like barter trade system, where they bring women in from sort of the native communities to have children within the city, because they're having issues having girls and the like. So it's a whole kind of like messed up system. But when they move south of the train, one of the things Hellward begins to notice is that the land begins to flatten out, and then his balance begins to change, and the appearances of the girls begin to change. And there's a sense of like time dilation that's occurring, that things begin to speed up really rapidly. That when Hellward returns back to the city after he's having a total sort of panic attack from the things he's seeing and the things he's experiencing, he finds that many years have passed. And of course, when he goes north of the train, the opposite occurs, where they're going up future instead of down past. And that ends up, potentially aging him and other people who go further north. You go into this book, and the more you learn about its intricacies and its histories, I think it is something that you will really, really enjoy. And I found it to be a really page-turning read. Priest is a very easy writer to read, though I will say, once it gets into sort of the specifics of how this world works, my not very good math brain was struggling to sort of understand, like, oh, what's a hyperbola? What I don't know geometry very hyperbola. What, I don't know geometry very well. I got like 400 something on the SATs in math. Okay, I was a lit guy. All right, but that is the only time where I felt like a little bit adrift, and was like having to Google what some of this stuff meant without trying to like spoil too much. I think that this is an excellent, excellent novel, though, and it makes me want to read way more Priest. I'm really interested in books like The Glamour, and I think it's The Affirmation, and of course The Prestige, which I do want to read. I've just seen the movie so many times. I think it's like one of Christopher Nolan's best written films, because it has such great source material that I need a little bit of time in order to probably absorb it. But who knows? I may just get a big fever for it and just go straight for it. So anyway, Inverted World, Christopher Priest. I give it 5 stars. I highly recommend it. And it's a quick read. You'll get it done probably in just a few days. I certainly like swallowed it whole. And I will say too, if you get the NYRB edition, make sure you read the afterword by John Clute. I had some questions about the ending and sort of how certain things were resolved that I was like, I don't know, am I totally satisfied with that ending? But then Clute recontextualizes everything, particularly when he speaks to how Priest is writing this from the perspective of an England that is trying to escape the austerity of post World War II and that period where England was in like a big cultural malaise. And I think that has like strengthened the ending for me significantly. So do read the afterword. It kind of like recapitulates like a lot of the plot, but the thematics are very good and very worth sort of diving in deeper. That's it. Those are all the books I read during COVID. Those are the books that kept me alive. What's next? I am reading currently Tales of Nevarian by Samuel R. Delany. I'm trying to like read that very fast as like my Pride Month read because I'm just so far behind. I got like once I start reading a book, and I started reading all of these because I had various reasons for why I was reading them. Some I needed to read as like a book review thing for the publisher. Some I needed to read because I just wanted to. And some of it was just because that's what was immediately accessible to me on my Kindle. So I kind of fell behind a little bit on my plan to read something for Pride Month here in June. But I am deep in the middle of that. I'm on like page 50 of like a 300-page book, so hopefully I'll be able to blow through that pretty quickly this week and have a review up that's like real snappy. And then I'm also reading Elmore Leonard's City Primeval, High Noon in Detroit. What a title. That is, I mean, it's so good. It's so good. And I'm trying to get back into like a crime state of mind because my next book, oh yeah, my book came out, by the way, if you didn't see the ad at the beginning. It came out, buy my book. My next book is gonna most likely be a crime fiction book, so I needed to get more food for thought there, and it's really just what the doctor ordered in terms of inspiration and the like. So anyway, as always, like, comment, subscribe, and buy my book, Taking Root on Amazon. And we'll see you next time. Keep on reading.